Hey there guys, Lee from straightwoo.com here with the solar eclipse in Leo reading. So much to talk about here. As always, I've got my pages of notes ready to chat it out. So let's get to it. First thing first is that to say this solar eclipse in Leo, one of many of eclipses that have been going on in Leo since 2017, seems to have been going on with a bit of a whimper. All the blogosphere was agog with a blood moon lunar eclipse in Aquarius from a couple weeks ago, and there's much less fervor out there for this one. But I really want to bring home and point your attention to a few certain things in this chart that I think are really important, and I think very much worthy of attention. Also because solar eclipses are a new rushing in or bursting forth of energy. They're like a super powered new moon. So brand new doors swinging open. And since we've already had eclipses, solar eclipses in Leo, we could say it's a continuing opening. In fact, there's been a really key narrative here that's unfolded from the Great American, in quotation marks, Great American solar eclipse that was the end of August 2017. The January 13th, let me check myself, January 31st, the exact same moment, total blood moon lunar eclipse in Leo. And now August 11th, solar eclipse in Leo. And they've had a running theme that connected them. I talked about this, I actually set the stage in August 2017. You might want to go back and read that post. It was a written post. I'll link it below. And then secondly, the January 31st video. You might want to go back and check that one out. There's been a running theme to all of them, and I kind of have covered them in parts and pieces throughout. But I'll recap it here and kind of, again, I hope bring home or elucidate what I think is really the core journey that we've been on since August 2017, wherever Leo is in your chart. August 2017 to January this year to where we are now. It's quite an exciting one. And although there are a lot of challenges in this chart, I feel good mostly about what this chart can promise in terms of growth and development. Whereas a couple weeks ago, the lunar eclipse in Aquarius chart was touchy and very borderline violent in the sense of like the energy behind it was really potent and charged. This one has tension, but I think the tension has great use and great purpose if we know what we're working with and we direct it the right way. So, like Dave Chappelle used to say, like to hear it go. The story that's been unfolding is about Ceres and Pluto and Persephone, the great ancient myth about Ceres, the loss of her daughter, Cor, who then became Persephone. And all of this was done under the auspices or well, technically under the auspices of Aphrodite. I'll get to that in a second. But also with Pluto, god of the underworld. And to kind of frame how to use myth and think about myth in this perspective, I'm borrowing this from Howard Sasportas, great astrologer, who said that myths are something that have never actually happened, but which are always happening. I love that. It really speaks to why we never give up stories. We never give up myths because we read myths and we see ourselves in them. And there's never any reason to move past them. There's a reason why they're so relevant even thousands of years later. Myths are never actually happened. You know, these are not stories that have any root in reality, but the story itself is always happening through us, through our lives, through the things we face as humans. And the story of Ceres and her daughter Cor, Persephone, and Pluto is essentially a lunar story of birth, death, loss, and rebirth, the kind of disappearance and reappearance act that the moon makes. There's many synergistic qualities between Ceres's tale and the lunar cycle, which has such a variable face, inevitably disappears from the sky, leaves us in a void for a certain amount of time, and then reemerges 3 days later. And here's the essential story. Although again, you might wish to reread the written post from August 2017 if you'd like to go back there. Ceres and Cor, her daughter, Cor meaning maiden, were so close. Also, by the way, Ceres, Demeter, same name. Cor, Persephone, same name, same person. I might inevitably skew them about. But Ceres and Core were attached to the hip, their mother and daughter. They were still in this very, what one would call like Ouroboros container of motherhood, the snake that eats its own tail and like continues in a ring. They were still in this Ouroboros, never-ending, endless container of child and mother, mother and child wrapped into one, like the umbilical cord still connected them. And Core would have suitors come, and they would be very interested because she was a stunning woman, or young woman at this point. And she would rebuff them, preferring the comfort and the security and the warmth of her mother's company. And Aphrodite, clever, tricky Aphrodite. So whenever you think about Venus in astrology, I want you to remember this, because Aphrodite is not just pretty things and luxury and frippery. Aphrodite looks down at some point and realizes that Core is rebuffing erotic attention. She's rebuffing her erotic life, and then she's not carrying forth into becoming a woman of her own through these experiences. And so she meddles, as Aphrodite does. She's quite a little tricky, cunning character when she wants to be. And she calls upon the attention of Pluto. And Pluto, seeing Core in a field with other maidens, likes what he sees, opens up the earth below her, and grabs her down into the underworld. So now she's in the clutches of the darkest, scariest, potentially also probably sexiest character of Greek myth. And both mother and daughter suffer greatly during this period. The separation that they feel is acute, their grief is unbearable. Ceres, aka Demeter, turns herself into a bird and flies all over the world, mournfully soaring and looking and trying to find her daughter. She goes and asks everybody on Mount Olympus if they've seen her, if they can find Persephone anywhere, or Core. Core, aka Persephone, is in the underworld and goes on a starvation diet. She refuses to eat or drink. She herself is also, she's been plunged into darkness. She's away from not only the warm embrace of her mother, the comfort, the security, everything that she's grown up with and known, but she's in not such a hospitable climate down in the underworld, and probably struggling to find her way. Demeter, back on Earth, becomes so enraged that no one will help her find her daughter and intervene on her behalf that she begins to put a famine on Earth and to ruin all of the crops and to make it so that humans struggle to survive. The gods watching this are terribly worried, not because they care about humans, by the way, but because without the humans, there would be no one to make great sacrifices and pledges and worship to them as gods. And so they set about trying to negotiate with Demeter to see if she'll just calm the fuck down and let all of the agricultural stuff occur once again. And Ceres is quite potent in the position to do this because she was the goddess, one of the goddesses of agriculture, particularly of wheat, and was said to have brought that crop to the Greek people. So finally, there's different versions of this myth, but the one I prefer, the crone goddess of the dark waning moon, Hecate. Waning moon, the loss, the release of things that no longer serve, the turning back of light, the move towards darkness. Hecate says, I think I know something and I think I can help you. And they do indeed find that Core, who is now turned into Persephone, she of light, having a link to Perseus, ancient lunar goddess. They find her down in the underworld, and they negotiate terms whereby Persephone, who used to be Core, would now be able to come above ground for a certain amount of time and then spend that time with her mother and then return to her role in the underworld. And many things happen, one of which is that Pluto tricks her. She's been on her hunger strike. She's been in starvation mode. And he gives her some pomegranate. Pomegranate seeds are red, of course, and they burst forth a red juice, not unlike a hymen that bursts forth with first blood. And this is supposed to be the moment of Persephone's deflowering. She's changed. She's no longer maiden. She's a woman. But now they're able to go back above ground and below ground. They make this dance. It's about seasons of change. And one of the reasons for the myth of Ceres, Persephone and Pluto, or Demeter, Persephone and Pluto technically, and Hades, Greek, Roman Greek, is that it described why we have fallow seasons. You know, the winter, when everything dies away. That is when Ceres is in mourning because Persephone has gone back below ground. And then Persephone at some time comes back above ground, and there's great rejoicing for Ceres, who then manifests that rejoicing as growth and rebirth and agriculture and success with crops on earth. And that's the mundane reason for the myth. But if you really look at the myth on a greater scale, it is about separation, loss, rebirth. It is about the times we need to plunge ourselves into very dark places. But in that place, like core, we can access a new identity with new power, with new responsibilities that separates us from who we were, but not totally. I mean, there's aspects of core that still remain, but it's the process of individuation. And also the separation from the mother, although we need her and we must return to her, we must do this dance, that staying in those clutches can be stagnant. Even, again, Aphrodite's role, we need to engage with the erotic. We need to go beyond the tight container of safety that we might negotiate for ourselves and feel like we should stay in. We need to break the vessel open. We need to go experience things. And sometimes those things are really fucking difficult. That is what this myth is about. And it was really interesting to see these charts unfold because Ceres and Pluto featured hugely in the Great American Solar Eclipse, August 2017. Also again in the January 31st blood moon lunar eclipse in Leo. And now once again in this chart. And they've kind of come full circle because the last two times they were quite tense aspects that seemed to suggest that we were going to deal with loss and separation. We were going to be in mourning. We were going to be in grief. I think it's particularly pertinent to relationships and probably relationship roles, and especially in this chart, which I'll talk about in a second. But it's about that ability to move through life and through seasons of change with confidence, and not to go immediately to the grief-stricken position of Demeter, who transforms into like this kind of like baleful bird traveling alone all over the world, looking, or kind of puts pox upon humanity. You know, that's projection, right? Or Persephone, who starves herself. She refuses to engage with the environment. She starves. She shuts down on her body and on her nurturance as a protest. I feel like since August 2017, we have made a definitive about shift in the space of our life, maybe perhaps particularly in the chart ruled by Leo, like that part of the chart, wherever that part of the chart is, or whatever house is that part of the chart for you. But I think it's overall a shift in dynamic. And it is that also that kind of dynamic shift from clutching onto things, like with white knuckle grip, afraid that things will leave you, terrified to know what it means to be without the thing that gives you the mirror that tells you who you are, to now shifting in this chart to be able to move, to fluidly make the dance between comfort and change, comfort and the erotic, static and the erotic. There's something here that's shifting very powerfully, and it's also about the acceptance of loss and separation in relationships, and that whether it's a family thing or a friendship thing, lovers or children, we need to make a dance with all of the people in our lives, whether we're on the receiving end or the active end. that allows us this movement to go above ground, to go below, um, to shift between different states of being and states of consciousness, to shift from being mother to being mistress, to shift from being um, just so many things. I feel like there's so many ways we could read this myth. There's so many ways we could read more into this chart. I mean, something else I've scribbled out in my notes, it's actually lyrics from a song called Time Moves Slow by Bad Bad Not Good. I know, strange name, but great song. And I was really struck by part of the lyrics and have been for many, many months for my own personal reasons, but I think it's relevant to this chart, which is running away is easy. It's the leaving that's hard. And I think this is one of the shifts, is like moving from the kind of mentality that I think near upon a year ago would have, some gut reactions would have just been to like run away, which is to snap the cord and pretend that this other thing didn't exist and to make a new reality, and nary the two shall ever meet, because we're desperate to do the running away, because that's what's usually safest for our ego. But I think part of this process has been understanding that, again, running away is easy, but it's the leaving that's hard. Because you can run away, but it doesn't mean you've left. Moving on to different parts of this chart. There's definitely something about relationships here. That's for sure. I hope I don't project way too much into these readings that's personal, because I've been in a very relationship-oriented space for several months at least. But it's hard for me not to see certain things in the chart. I mean, most notably, the solar eclipse in Leo for this reading, it's at 18 degrees 41 of Leo. Makes a very close conjunction to asteroid Pallas Athena, and very tight squares to asteroid goddess Juno on one side and Jupiter on the other. So there's this T-square. Sun, Moon, Pallas, and even Mercury, a little bit looser, but there. Juno, goddess of marriage, at 90 degrees, and Jupiter right across from them in Scorpio. And what this suggests to me is there's like a few different things in play. Jupiter or Juno in Taurus wants to connect on a sensate level, very sensually, organically, quite solid, quite material and secure and grounded, and it's very comfortable. Juno in Taurus connects with people, and this is intimating, so it might be intimacy in a relationship, or it just could be how we relate to people. There's comfort here. Jupiter, right across from her archetypal husband, aka Zeus, in Scorpio, where he's been since October of last year, wants something different. He wants to penetrate. He wants depth. He wants intensity. I was thinking when I was writing my notes, there's the Stevie Wonder song, Let's Get Serious. Let's get serious. This would be like if Jupiter and Scorpio had a song, it would be Let's Get Uncomfortable. It pries beneath the surface. It doesn't want things to be sensual. It wants it to be sexual, in the sense that sensual things are like the fleeting moment of pleasure that's quite it's not pointed, it's very abstract and fleeting, sensual, based on the sensate experience, and it's something that we embody and we kind of have a relationship to back and forth, and we experience, and by focusing on the experience, there's something that releases. But Jupiter in Scorpio is much more directly sexual, directly erotic. There's a lot of ways I could try to describe this. None of them will be comfortable for anyone, but it's much more phallic in nature. It's the ripping open of something. It's the prying. It is Juno and Taurus is making love. Jupiter and Scorpio is fucking, as in as an example. And so that there's something there about that dynamic I find really interesting. Um, the play between these two worlds, who wins, who doesn't, what kind of energy gets expressed. And here's the sun, moon, and Pallas sitting between both of these points, kind of like looking looking at the options, surveying what's on play. Um, and you may find yourself more attracted to one avenue than the other. The crux, though, is really Sun, Moon, Pallas in Leo. Pallas is brilliant. Pallas is intelligent. She's healing. There are connections to gender identity. I'd say she's quite an animus heavy feminine character. She's more alpha female, or quite warrior-esque in her poise and her how she carries herself and how she acts. She's quite steely and cool, slightly more fiery because she's in Leo right now. Um, but she has a cool-edged brilliance that shines through. And sitting somewhat next to Mercury retrograde in Leo, I'm kind of thinking that Mercury retrograde is bringing up past thoughts and communique and people and situations and scenarios, smashing them in to Pallas Athena, this cold brilliance, and then marrying it with the solar eclipse. So there's the sense of like the solar eclipse is something new, Mercury retrograde is something old, and that these two worlds are colliding quite positively for something new and fresh. I think the Sun Moon Pallas square to Jupiter is, I always call, Pallas to Jupiter in this kind of configuration. I always think about doing the right thing, but for the wrong reason. So it's like check your motivations, check your intentions, check where you're going with something, why you're doing something the way you are. I'm always a big fan of checking in with your body and telling letting your body tell you what you're doing and understanding if you think that's the right thing. It could also be a lot of pressured situations where we have a high achievement need in some way, or we're kind of repeating an old pattern that got lent down to us from probably a father figure, or if not a direct father, somebody that's kind of like heavy animus masculine energy. In the other corner, the Sun, Moon, Pallas square to Juno first makes me think about gender issues in relationships. That could be direct experience of gender. For some, it's also probably about gender role and who, quote unquote, kind of wears the pants and who doesn't, and how that is playing out, and what our ideas about femininity and masculinity are doing in our relationships, and how they are leading us to certain, possibly very, I love this phrase, like ungratifying cul-de-sac. If we find ourselves struggling with aspects of our inner or feminine or masculine, that could be something to play out and to give a little bit of airtime to. Sun, Moon, and Pallas also, though, make a trine to asteroid Vesta. So I think there is focus here, there's discipline, there's brilliance. The brilliance of Pallas Athena in Leo is going to find a great funnel in Vesta in Sagittarius right now. So there's also something really cooking and bubbling across that space that I think is going to be good juju. And I would also say that something I've really been thinking about, the Mercury retrogrades this year first happened in Aries. There's currently one right now that we're going through in Leo, and there will be one in December in Sagittarius. So I think part of what could happen here is that whatever's being chucked up at this solar eclipse in Leo, with nearby Mercury retrograde in Leo, we may find some kind of energy shift when the Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius occurs, which will be November 17th to December 6th, and it will cross the degrees of where asteroid Vesta is right now. So that's something to watch out for. Another relationship angle to this chart is Venus in Libra, opposite Chiron, square Saturn, and trine the south node, sextile the north node. I think this This talks about limits and endings in relationships. It talks about the healing of it, the painful wounds of ending relationships, but also the healing that comes from that once we finally give something its just end. Um, you kind of have to lance the boil in order for the healing to happen. And I think with Venus to the South Node, there is going to be a great release of old ideals about love, any relationships that are kind of on the way out. I think there is quite a lot of relationship tension in this chart, but I think there's also the ability to release. It's also worth saying that Venus at 4 degrees Libra is in a pretty nice little trine with Mars, which is currently at 0 degrees of Aquarius, just about to move back into Capricorn as part of its retrograde. And Venus trine Mars is very sexy. So if you've got stuff boiling there, and if you've got good planets around the air signs, 0 to 6 degrees ish of Gemini, Libra, Aquarius, you might want to check that out. And I think that is probably this chicken cooked. My big sense, though, is really this is about the Ceres-Pluto story. This is about separation and loss and relationships, how we related to relationships, what kind of tether and like hooked in, like there's the real tendency to like put our hooks into somebody or something and to never let go, and again white knuckle grip our way through relationship, like forcing people and situations to be the way that we want them to be, because of our fears, our insecurities, the idea of future anticipated loss that we just cannot deal with. And I feel like the shift from August 2017 until now has been learning how to move through seasons of change, learning how to fluidly react and be in relationship with people, and to do it from a place of inner knowing that the loss will come, but so will the return. And so I just want to leave you guys with that. Really sending all of you solar eclipse blessings. And I will see all of you soon on the blog. Again, this is Lee from straightwoo.com. Been a pleasure, and I will talk to you guys soon. Ciao.